At my mother's wake, my uncle hugged me and said, "Come live with me, I'll take care of you." Every Friday, he forced me to wear her wedding dress and beat me until I collapsed, until I found an old bloodstain on the fabric and discovered he had killed my mother while she wore that dress. Hi there, my dears. How wonderful to be here with you again. Come on in, pull up a chair. Today I'm here in my cozy kitchen making homemade caramel sauce that's simmering slowly in this copper pot here. Can you smell that? Oh, if only it could come through the screen. This is the caramel I make every week to sell at the farmer's market. And while I stir this wooden spoon that's been with me for over 30 years, I'm going to tell you the hardest story I've ever lived through. My name is Laura Henderson. I'm 72 years old, and today I live here in Crossville, Tennessee. This beautiful little town, full of old buildings and good people, is where I was reborn after going through the worst nightmare anyone could imagine. But I'll get to that in a bit. Let me first tell you a little about myself today, okay? This kitchen here is my sacred space, you know? After folks in the neighborhood started discovering my caramel sauce, I haven't stopped making it. Every Saturday morning I wake up early around 5 o'clock and come in here to turn on the stove. I use fresh cream from Mr. Caldwell's farm, the real thick kind, from Happy Cows. You know how it is. Then I mix it with sugar in just the right amount, a pinch of baking soda to get that creamy consistency, and I stand here stirring, stirring, stirring. It's almost like meditation, honey. While I stir, I talk to God, thanking Him for each day, for each morning I wake up breathing this fresh Tennessee air. I started making this caramel about 15 years ago, when I retired from working at the town library. I needed something to keep me busy, you know? And I also needed some extra money to supplement my retirement, which wasn't quite enough on its own. At first, I only made it for family, for neighbors. But then a lady tried it and said, "Miss Laura, you need to sell this at the market." And that's what I did. Today, thank God, I have my regular customers. People come from far away just to buy my caramel sauce. This gives me such joy, such purpose, you understand? While the caramel simmers here on low heat, you have to be patient, can't rush it or it'll burn. I wanted to ask something special of you watching right now, okay? If you enjoyed meeting me, if you related to this grandma here, hit that red subscribe button down below and turn on the notification bell for goodness sake, because every week I come here to tell a story, and I don't want you to miss a single one. Oh, and tell me here in the comments, what town are you watching from? And what time of day did you find this video? Early morning like me with your coffee? Or after lunch during that drowsy time? Or in the evening before bed? I always read every comment, I swear, and it makes me so happy to know where you're from and when you take time out of your day to listen to this grandma's stories. Tell me, won't you, sweetheart? Let's create a chain of kindness here. But now, while I stir this caramel and feel this warm steam rising, I need to be honest with you. The story I'm going to tell today is heavy. It's about a time in my life that almost destroyed me. It's about how I was deceived by the only person I thought I could trust after my mother died. It's about an uncle who should have protected me, but turned my life into a hell of fear and pain. And it's about how I discovered a terrible truth hidden in a blood-stained wedding dress. If you or someone you know has been through something similar, stay here with me. Because in the end, I promise, there's hope. There's a new beginning. There's this kitchen smelling of caramel and a life worth living. I was born in Maryville, a historic little town here in Tennessee, in 1953. Maryville was known for its textile mills and the old Victorian houses you can still see there today. My mother's name was Evelyn Henderson, and my father, Walter Henderson. They were simple people, hard-working, truly good folks. My father was a railroad worker, worked at the Maryville station. Every morning at 5 o'clock, he'd leave the house with the lunch pail my mother had prepared the night before. I still remember the sound of the gate when he closed it, that creaking metal sound that echoed down the still dark street. My mother. Oh, my mother was the sunshine of my life. Evelyn was a seamstress, worked from home. We lived in a simple 3-room house on Commerce Street, right near the First Baptist Church. The front room was where her Singer sewing machine sat, that black one with the golden pedals. I spent hours sitting on the floor of that room, playing with the fabric scraps she gave me, making little cloth dolls while listening to the tick-tick-tick of the machine. My mother sewed for half the town, made party dresses, christening gowns, school uniforms. Ladies would come to our house, and she'd measure, mark, cut, sew. She had fairy hands, everyone said. It was just the three of us. I was an only child, not because my parents didn't want more children, but because God willed it that way. My mother had lost 2 babies before me, and after I was born, doctors said she couldn't have any more. So I was the apple of their eye, the darling of the house. But I wasn't spoiled, no ma'am. My father and mother raised me to be a worker, to have character. From the time I was little, I helped with chores, swept the house, washed dishes in the kitchen sink, helped hang clothes on the line. Our life was simple, but it was happy. In the morning, after my father left for work, my mother and I would have breakfast together. Biscuits with butter, coffee with cream nice and hot, sometimes a piece of cornbread she made on the wood stove. Then I'd go to school, Jefferson Elementary, which was about 5 blocks from home. I walked there, always with other girls from the street. We'd carry our lunch boxes with ham sandwiches or cookies my mother made. At school, I was a good student, loved to read, to write. The teacher, Mrs. Harrison, always said, "Laura's going places. This girl has a good head on her shoulders." After school, I'd run home, because I had to help my mother. Often she had so much work that I'd thread needles for her, sort buttons, fold the finished pieces. But there was always time left over to play. Me and the girls from the street, Judy, Teresa, Nancy, we'd play hopscotch, jump rope, house under the magnolia tree in Mrs. Gibson's backyard. They were simple games, but they filled our days with joy. My father would come home around 6 in the evening, tired, his clothes all dirty with grease and soot from the trains. He'd take a bath in the little bathroom in the back, change clothes, and we'd sit down to dinner. My mother cooked so well, made that southern fried chicken that'd make your mouth water, mashed potatoes, collard greens, cornbread, white rice. On Sundays, it was fried chicken with okra, our weekly feast. After dinner, my father would listen to the battery radio while my mother embroidered or crocheted. I'd be drawing on the floor or flipping through old magazines that my mother's customers brought. But there was one presence that always bothered me a little, even when I was so young. My Uncle Chester. He was my mother's older brother, about 10 years older than her. Chester lived alone in a big mansion that had belonged to the family there in downtown Maryville. Our grandparents had died when my mother was still young and left that huge house and some land to Chester and my mother. But from what I understood from the adults' whispers, most of the inheritance had gone to my mother, and Chester never really accepted that. He'd come visit us from time to time, always in a suit, smelling of a strong cologne that made me queasy. He'd bring me presents, a doll, a new notebook, peppermint candies. But I felt he didn't really like me. The way he looked at my mother was strange. He smiled, but his eyes were hard, you know? Cold. When he arrived, my mother would get tense. She'd serve coffee, offer cake, but I could tell she breathed easier when he left. Once, I must have been about 8 years old, I heard an argument between them. My father had gone out to buy bread, and Uncle Chester showed up suddenly. He and my mother talked in the living room, and his voice got louder and louder. I was in the backyard, but I could hear him saying, "You got everything, Evelyn? Everything, and I got the scraps. This isn't right." My mother answered, calm but firm, "It was Mom and Dad's decision, Chester. I didn't steal anything from you." He left, slamming the door. My mother stood at the window, hand on her chest, breathing deeply. When she saw me looking, she smiled and said, "It's nothing, sweetheart, grown-up stuff." But that stayed stored in my memory. The way Uncle Chester looked at my mother, the way he said, "You got everything," with so much venom in his voice. I was a child, but I could already feel that this man carried enormous resentment, a bitterness that boiled inside. The years passed like that, between my mother's sewing machine, The train whistle where my father worked, playing on the dirt road, summer barbecues and sweet tea, Sunday services at the Baptist church. I grew up in that good routine, surrounded by my parents' love, protected from the world. When I turned 12, I got my first young lady's dress, made by my mother with beautiful flowered fabric. I felt so grown up that day. But childhood was ending, and soon adolescence would arrive, bringing changes I could never predict. Adolescence passed in the blink of an eye. I kept studying, helping my mother with sewing, growing up in that quiet and welcoming Maryville. When I turned 15, I started working part-time as an assistant at the town library. It was Mrs. Harrison who got me the position, saying I was studious and deserved the opportunity. I loved that work, loved the smell of old books, the nice silence between the shelves. My father was so proud when I brought my first paycheck home. My mother cried with joy and said, "My daughter's going to be somebody." My father died when I was 17. It was sudden, a massive heart attack while working at the station. They couldn't even get him to the hospital alive. It broke our hearts. The house felt empty without the sound of the gate in the early morning, without the sound of the radio at night. But my mother and I held on to each other and moved forward. She kept sewing. I kept working at the library. Money was tight, but we managed. And Uncle Chester? He showed up at my father's funeral, stayed half an hour, and left. Didn't offer help, didn't ask if we needed anything. My mother didn't expect any different. It was in early 1972, right after I'd turned 19, January 14th had been my birthday, that tragedy struck. It was an ordinary Tuesday, February 8th. I'd left for work at the library early in the morning, same as always. My mother was fine, had woken up in good spirits, even mentioned she was going to make cornbread for our afternoon snack. I kissed her and left. When I came back around noon, I thought it was strange that the front door was ajar. "Mom?" I called, entering slowly. Silence. "Mom?" A chill ran down my spine. I went to her bedroom and, my God in heaven, she was lying on the floor beside the bed, motionless, with her eyes open but lifeless. I screamed until the neighbors came running. Mr. Parker went to get the doctor, but when he arrived, there was nothing more to be done. The doctor. Mitchell, a thin man with thick glasses who treated half the town, examined my mother right there in the bedroom. He frowned, checked her pulse, listened to her heart with the stethoscope. Then he stood up and said, with a strange voice, "It was her heart. Massive heart attack. These things happen, young lady. My condolences." I was in shock. "But doctor, my mother was healthy. She never complained about her heart. How can it be a heart attack?" He looked at me over his glasses and repeated more firmly, "It was her heart, Laura. There's nothing to discuss. I'll sign the death certificate, find a funeral home." And he left, too quickly, without looking back. The following days were a blur of pain. The wake was in our living room, as was customary. They placed the casket in the middle of the room where my mother's singer machine sat. The neighbor ladies brought coffee, sandwiches, cake. The house filled with people saying the rosary, hugging me, saying my mother had gone to heaven. I couldn't stop crying. It was at the wake that Uncle Chester arrived. He came through the door in a black suit with a bouquet of white flowers. He walked to the casket, stood looking at my mother for way too long. And then he cried, thick tears rolling down his face. I was surprised because I'd never seen Uncle Chester show emotion. He came to me, hugged me tight, and whispered in my ear, "Laura, my girl, you don't deserve to go through this. You're so young, so alone now. I'm the only family you have left." I cried on his shoulder, seeking comfort, wanting to believe I wasn't completely alone in the world. After the burial, when everyone had gone and I was sitting in the empty living room looking at the still singer machine, Uncle Chester came back. He sat beside me and said, with a gentle, protective voice, "Laura, come live with me. This house is too small, full of sad memories. You can't stay alone. I have that huge mansion with rooms to spare. I'll take care of you like your mother would. You're my niece, my blood. Let me protect you." I looked at him with eyes swollen from crying and asked, "Are you sure, Uncle Chester? I don't want to be a burden." He held my hand and answered, "I'm absolutely sure, my girl. You'll come to my house, have a nice room, good food, you can keep working at your library. I just want you to be okay. It's the least I can do for Evelyn's memory." I accepted. My God, how I regret accepting. But in that moment, lost, scared, without direction, I thought I was being saved. A week later I moved. I took my clothes, some books, my parents' wedding photo. Uncle Chester's mansion was huge. 2 floors, lots of rooms, old dark wood furniture, a backyard with rose bushes, and a stone fountain. He gave me a room on the 2nd floor, with a big bed, an oak wardrobe, and a window overlooking the garden. "Make yourself at home, Laura. This is your house now," he said, smiling. For the first few days he was kind, even too attentive. He'd have the cook, Mrs. Collins, prepare my favorite foods. He'd ask how my day at the library had been. Even offered to pay for classes so I could study more. I thought, maybe I misjudged Uncle Chester all these years. Maybe he's matured. Maybe he really cares about me. But then, in the 2nd week, he came with some papers. It was a Friday night. I was in my room reading. He knocked on the door, came in, and sat in the chair beside the bed. "Laura, I need to talk to you about something important. It's about your mother's inheritance." My heart tightened. "What inheritance, Uncle Chester?" He sighed, theatrical. "Your mother had assets, Laura. The house where you lived, some land that belonged to the family, some savings. All of that is yours now. But you're very young, don't know how to handle these things. I prepared some documents here where you give me temporary management of these assets. It's just so I can take care of it for you, understand? So nobody deceives you. When you get older, more mature, I'll give it all back." I was naive, stupid, trusting. I signed. I signed everything he put in front of me without reading properly, without suspecting. He smiled, put away the papers, and said, "There, now everything's resolved. You don't need to worry about anything." The next morning, I woke up and went downstairs for breakfast. The house was strangely silent. I went to the kitchen and didn't find Mrs. Collins. Not the gardener, Mr. Thompson. Not the cleaning lady, Mrs. Wilson. I went looking for Uncle Chester and found him in the living room, sitting in an armchair, drinking coffee and reading the newspaper. "Uncle Chester, where is everyone who works here?" He slowly lowered the newspaper and looked at me with a look I'd never seen before. A cold look, hard, empty of any affection. "I fired everyone," he said with a monotone voice. "I don't need them anymore, and you're not leaving here either." I gave a nervous laugh, thinking it was a joke. "What do you mean I'm not leaving? I have to work, Uncle." He got up from the armchair in a sudden movement and came toward me. He stood very close, looking down at me. "You're not working anywhere anymore, Laura. You're going to stay here, in this house, with me. Did you understand me?" My whole body trembled. "Uncle Chester, I don't understand. You're scaring me." He gave a crooked smile, bitter, full of malice. "You're just like her. The same innocent face, the same whiny voice. Your mother stole everything that was mine, Laura. She got the house, the land, our parents' money, and me? I got the scraps. But now you're going to pay for everything she did." I didn't leave that mansion for 5 years. 5 years, my dears. From 1972 until 1977, I was a prisoner of my own uncle in that huge and silent house. He'd lock the doors from the outside when he left, take the keys, cover the first-floor windows with nailed boards. My room on the 2nd floor had bars on the window. He said he'd had them installed for my safety, but I knew it was, so I wouldn't jump. There was no phone in the house, no way to call for help. The routine was always the same, terrible, unbearable. During the week, Monday through Thursday, he ignored me almost completely. He'd leave food ready in the refrigerator, stale bread, overripe fruit, sometimes a piece of tough meat. I ate alone in the big empty kitchen, hearing only the sound of the wall clock going tick-tock, tick-tock. He'd leave early in the morning, never told me where, but I imagined he was taking care of business that now included my stolen inheritance, and only come back at night. When he came back, he'd go straight to his room and leave me alone. On those days, I'd spend hours walking through the empty house, looking at the locked windows, trying to find an exit that didn't exist. But every Friday was hell. The first time happened the Friday after his revelation. I'd spent the whole week terrified, not fully understanding what was happening, thinking maybe he'd change his mind, that it was all a misunderstanding. But on Friday, when the sun began to set and the house filled with long shadows, I heard the key turning in my bedroom door. He came in. He was dressed in an impeccable gray suit, hair combed back, smelling of that sickening cologne. But his face was different. His eyes shone with something dark, an old rage he'd kept for years. "Get up," he ordered. I stood up from the bed, shaking. "Follow me." He took me up the stairs to the attic, a place I didn't even know existed in the house. The door creaked when he opened it, and a smell of mold and dust entered my nostrils. There was a yellow bulb hanging from the ceiling, poorly illuminating the space full of old boxes, furniture covered with sheets, and a metal clothing rack in the center. And on that rack hung a wedding dress, a white dress, vintage, with delicate lace and pearl buttons. I recognized it immediately. It was the dress my mother had worn at her wedding. I'd seen that dress in photos. "Put it on," he said, pointing to the dress with a dry gesture. I looked at him without understanding. "What?" I said, "Put on that dress. Now." His voice was ice. My fingers trembled so much when I grabbed the dress that I almost dropped it. "Uncle Chester, I don't understand. Why do you want me to—" "Put it on!" he yelled so loud I jumped. With tears streaming down my face, I took off my simple clothes and put on that dress. It was tight. My mother was thinner than me and smelled of mothballs and thyme. The buttons were hard to close, but I managed with trembling hands. When I finished, he looked me up and down, slowly, and then he started walking in circles around me like a predator studying its prey. "Perfect," he whispered. "You look just like her. Evelyn on her wedding day, when she married that railroad bum and left home taking everything that was ours." He stopped in front of me and pointed his finger in my face. "Do you know how much I hated your mother, Laura? How much I wanted her to pay for stealing my life?" I couldn't speak. I just cried. He went to a corner of the attic and picked up a bamboo cane, the kind used to beat rugs. My heart raced. "Uncle Chester, please." He didn't let me finish. "Every Friday you'll come here, you'll wear this dress, and you'll get beaten, because I want you to feel, on your skin, what I felt during all those years watching that selfish woman live well with money that was mine." And he hit me. I won't describe the details because it hurts too much just to remember, but he hit my back, my arms, my legs. I fell on the cold wooden floor with that white dress getting dirty with dust, and he continued. "This is for the money. This is for the house. This is for every day I had to swallow my rage," he screamed while the cane sang through the air. I begged, asked forgiveness for things I hadn't even done, but he didn't stop. He only stopped when he got tired. Then he left, locked the attic door, and left me there all night. I stayed curled up on that freezing floor, dressed as a bride, bleeding inside from pain and humiliation. He only released me Saturday morning. And this repeated, every Friday for 5 years. I knew that when Friday came, he'd climb those stairs, take me to the attic, force me to wear that cursed dress, and use me as a punching bag to avenge the rage he felt toward my mother. He never touched me sexually. Never. His hatred wasn't that. It was deeper, sicker. He wanted to destroy his sister's image through me. He wanted to beat Evelyn. But since she was dead, I was the target. I tried to escape twice. The first time, I managed to break the kitchen lock with a knife. I made it to the front gate, but the gate was too high, had iron spikes on top, and I couldn't climb it. He caught me right there, dragged me back, and beat me even more that Friday. "You think you're getting out of here? You're mine now, Laura. Nobody knows you're here. Nobody's going to look for you." And it was true. I'd lost contact with everyone when I moved. People thought I'd left town, that I'd moved on with my life. The second time, I tried screaming out the bedroom window. I screamed for help until my throat was raw. But the mansion was surrounded by high walls and dense trees. Nobody heard. And when he found out, the following Friday, he beat me in silence, without yelling, which was even more terrifying. I lost a lot of weight. My hair started falling out. I had nightmares every night. I dreamed I was being buried alive. I dreamed of my mother calling me, but I couldn't reach her. I'd wake up sweating, shaking, counting the days until the next Friday. The fear was so constant it became part of me. I walked through the house like a ghost, without hope, without a future. And the worst part? I started to believe I deserved it. That somehow I was guilty. That I had inherited my mother's guilt and needed to pay for it. He had broken me inside. It wasn't just my body that was hurt. It was my soul. It was a Friday in March 1977. I had just turned 24. I'd turned another year older alone, without cake, without birthday wishes, with nothing but the sound of the wall clock marking each second of my empty existence. 5 years had passed since I'd entered that mansion. 5 years of Fridays in the attic, 5 years wearing that cursed dress, 5 years being beaten until I couldn't stand anymore. I was no longer the 19-year-old Laura, full of dreams and hope, that girl who loved the library books and dreamed of studying more. I was an empty shell, a broken doll, a shadow wandering the dark corridors waiting for the next blow. On that particular Friday, when he climbed the stairs and opened my bedroom door, I already knew what was coming. I didn't even cry anymore. The tears had dried up long ago, or maybe I simply had nothing left inside me to shed. I just got up from the bed where I spent my days lying down staring at the cracked ceiling and followed him to the attic, like a trained animal that knows the way to the slaughterhouse. Each step on that staircase was like climbing to the gallows. I put on the dress in silence with mechanical movements. My hands no longer trembled. I'd gotten used to the horror, and that was the scariest part of all. When you get used to hell, when fear becomes routine, it's because you've already died inside. But that night, something was different. I felt it in the air even before he opened his mouth. He was more violent, more out of control, swaying slightly. He'd been drinking. I could smell the strong whiskey on his breath, that sour smell that turned my stomach. His eyes were red, glazed, with an even deeper rage than usual. "Today marks 5 years," he said, walking in circles around me like a vulture circling carrion. His voice was thick, slurred. 5 years since that viper of a mother of yours died and left me this rotten inheritance. You. 5 years I've had to look at your face every day and see her face mocking me. He picked up the bamboo cane, and I prepared myself mentally, as I always did, trying to go to a distant place in my head where the pain couldn't reach. But this time was different. He started beating me with a fury I'd never seen before. The blows came faster, harder, with no pause between them. I fell to the floor almost immediately, but he didn't stop. He continued, screaming disconnected things about my mother, about money, about injustice. I felt something break inside me, a sharp crack on the left side of my chest that made me let out a hoarse scream. I don't know if it was a rib, if it was the last of my courage, or if it was the last spark of will to live that I still had hidden in some dark corner of my soul. When he finally stopped, not because he wanted to, but because he was too tired to lift his arm, he spat on the floor near me and left staggering, locking the door with a crash that echoed through the empty attic. I stayed there on the cold wooden floor, bleeding inside and out, panting, each breath bringing a stabbing pain in my chest. I tasted blood in my mouth. I'd bitten my tongue without realizing. The dress was torn at the hem. The fabric had caught on a loose nail in the floor when I fell sideways, trying to protect myself. I lay looking at that tear without being able to move any muscle, every inch of my body throbbing with pain. And it was there, in that moment of total surrender, that a thought crossed my mind with frightening clarity. It's today. Today I'm going to die here. I can't take it anymore. I don't want to anymore. It was almost a relief to think that. The idea of simply closing my eyes and never waking up again seemed like paradise compared to living through one more Friday, one more month, one more year in that hell. But my body, moved by a survival instinct that my mind had already abandoned, started to move. Trying to fix the torn hem of the dress just because my brain was on autopilot doing anything to keep from going completely insane. My trembling fingers touched the fabric. That's when I saw it. In the inner fold of the fabric, where the lining met the hem, well hidden in the layers of cloth, there was a stain, a dark, hardened, old stain. Different from any normal dirt. Something inside me, a morbid curiosity perhaps, or a sixth sense whispering that this was important, made me bring my face closer, trying to see better in the dim yellow light of the bulb hanging from the ceiling. I spit on my finger, my saliva mixed with a little blood from my cut tongue, and rubbed the stain hard. It faded a little, and the color that came out was unmistakable, rust red, dried blood, very old blood incorporated into the fabric by time. My heart, which was almost stopping from so much trauma, started beating hard again. Thump, 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 thump. That blood wasn't mine. Not from that time, at least. The stain had been there for years, hardened by time, a permanent part of the fabric. It was blood from before, from long before. I started examining the entire dress with an urgency I hadn't felt in 5 long and terrible years. My hands, which minutes ago were lifeless, now moved frantically over every inch of the yellowed white fabric. That's when I noticed, at rib height on the left side, exactly where I had just felt something break inside me, the fabric had a hole. A small circular hole, as if it had been made by something pointed. And around that hole, someone had mended it with different colored thread. A thick seam, uneven, poorly made, done hastily by hands that clearly didn't know how to sew. Male hands. These weren't the delicate and perfect stitches my mother made. It was a crude, rushed patch, made to hide something. My God, I whispered to the oppressive silence of the attic, my voice coming out hoarse and broken. My God in heaven. The pieces started fitting together in my head like a macabre puzzle. My mother didn't die of a heart attack. Someone had hurt her. Someone had punctured her, had made a hole in her while she wore this wedding dress. And Dr. Mitchell, with that rushed and nervous manner, had lied on the death certificate. And Uncle Chester had kept this dress as a trophy of his sinister victory. With my hands now trembling with rage, not fear, but an old and boiling rage that was starting to bubble inside me, I began to feel every inch of the dress with feverish obsession. There had to be something else. There had to be. And it was in the secret pocket of the lining, that small and almost invisible pocket that brides in the old days used to keep embroidered handkerchiefs and St. Medals, that my fingers touched paper. Folded paper, carefully tucked in there, protected from the decades. I pulled slowly, slowly, afraid of tearing what could be my only salvation. It was a notebook page, yellowed by time, with slightly brittle edges. And there, written in my mother's round and pretty cursive handwriting. That handwriting I knew so well from shopping lists stuck on the refrigerator, from loving notes she left in my school notebook, from labels she sewed on the clothes she made, was a message. A message from beyond the grave. My tears started falling thick and hot on the paper as I read, each word illuminated by the dim light of the bulb. February 8th, 1972. Chester came to the house this morning, before Laura came back from work. He's different, disturbed, with glazed eyes, talking nonsense about money, about Mom and Dad giving me everything, about me stealing his future. He forced me to wear my wedding dress, said I had to sign some papers dressed for the special occasion, like a cruel mockery of my marriage. I tried to calm him, convince him I didn't steal anything, that it was our parents' decision, but he won't listen. He has a knife in his hand, a big kitchen knife. I'm very afraid. He said, if I scream, he'll kill me on the spot. If something happens to me, it was Chester. He confessed he paid Dr. Mitchell to cover everything up, that he has it all planned. Laura, my beloved daughter, if you ever read this, run from him. Never trust him. He's dangerous, sick with hatred. Protect yourself. I love you more than anything in this world. Mom. I read that note 3, 4, 5 times. Each word was a stab in my already broken chest. Each line confirmed the horror I'd lived through. But it was also the truth I desperately needed. My uncle had killed my mother, had stabbed her in that same cursed dress, had cleaned up the crime scene, bribed the medical examiner, forged the heart attack on the certificate. And he'd brought me to live with him not out of pity, not out of family love, but to continue his sick revenge. He had murdered his sister in cold blood and now was slowly destroying her daughter, week after week, beating after beating. I folded the note with trembling hands and hid it inside my underwear, pressed against my sweaty and bruised skin. It was the only proof I had, the only thing that could save me. I spent the entire night in that freezing attic, awake, ignoring the pain that throbbed in every nerve of my body. For the first time in 5 endless years, I felt something beyond despair and resignation. I felt hatred, a pure, crystalline, powerful hatred. And hatred, I discovered that transformative night under the yellow light, is a much more powerful and lasting fuel than hope. Saturday morning, when he opened the attic door with the key creaking in the lock, I went down the stairs in silence. I didn't look at his face, didn't say a word. I went to my room, carefully took off the torn dress. I had to preserve every thread of that evidence, and hid it under the mattress along with the precious note. During the following days, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I observed everything with new eyes. The exact times he left, how long he stayed out, where he entered when he returned, where he left the keys when he was home, always in his pocket, damn it, how he locked the doors, where the tree closest to the wall was. On Wednesday, when he left for what seemed to be a longer trip, I saw he took a small suitcase and mentioned something about only coming back tomorrow. I knew it was my chance, maybe the only one. I grabbed a heavy wooden chair, dragged it to my bedroom window, making as little noise as possible, and started to work. I'd torn off a piece of metal from the bed frame during the night, a thin but sturdy bar. Using it as a lever, I started hitting the window bars, trying to loosen the rusty screws that held them to the masonry wall. I hit. My hands bled. Blisters formed and burst. My arms hurt so much I thought they'd fall off. But I didn't stop. Each blow was for my mother. Each blow was for the 5 stolen years. Each blow was for the 19-year-old girl I'd never be again. After 2 hours of exhausting work, sweat running down my face, blood dripping from my fingers, one of the bars finally gave way with a victorious metallic creak. I looked down. It was the 2nd floor. The distance to the ground seemed enormous, dangerous. If I jumped, I'd probably break something. My legs, my arms, my neck, God forbid. But it was my chance. My only chance. I grabbed the blood-stained dress and the life-saving note, tied everything in an improvised bundle with an old sheet. I made the sign of the cross. I prayed a whole Hail Mary, the words coming out trembling from my chapped lips, and I jumped. The pain when my left ankle twisted on impact with the hard ground was beyond anything I'd ever felt. It was like they'd stuck a red-hot knife inside my bone and twisted it. I screamed, bit my lip until it bled again, but forced myself to get up. Every movement was pure agony. But I was out. I was outside that cursed prison. I dragged myself to the front gate, limping, moaning, but was almost free. The gate was locked with a thick chain and huge padlock. There was no way out that way. I looked around desperately, panic starting to rise. I had to get out before he came back, and saw a part of the side wall where the stones were looser, worn by time, with an old oak tree growing nearby. With my broken ankle throbbing, pulsing with pain at each heartbeat, I started climbing that tree, praying to God, to my mother in heaven, to any force that was listening, not to faint. Branch by branch, inch by inch, my bleeding hands gripped the rough bark, the useless ankle dangling. When I finally managed to get over the stone wall and fall on the other side, an awkward fall that made me scream again, I fell onto a dirt road I didn't recognize anymore. 5 years had passed. The world had kept turning, the trees had grown, the houses had been painted, while I was trapped in that timeless nightmare. I limped down the street barefoot, my feet cut on the pebbles, dirty with dirt and blood, holding my bundle against my chest, when an elderly lady who was sweeping her sidewalk with a broom saw me and dropped everything, screaming, "My God in heaven, girl, Jesus Christ, what happened to you?" I fell to my knees right there in front of her, in the dirt road, and cried. I cried like I hadn't cried in 5 years, sobs that shook my whole body. "Please," I begged, the words coming out broken between sobs. "Please, ma'am, help me. Take me to the police station. I need to report a murderer, please." The lady who found me was named Mrs. Davis. She was about 70 years old, white hair pulled back in a bun, and kind brown eyes. When she saw me there, fallen on my knees in the dirt road, dirty, bleeding, holding that bundle like it was the most precious thing in the world, she didn't hesitate. "Girl, come here, come," she said, helping me up with surprising strength for her age. "My son has a truck. He'll take you where you need to go." Her son, Gerald, was a man in his 40s, a taxi driver. When he saw the state I was in, he went pale. "Mom, this girl needs a hospital." But I grabbed his arm firmly. "No," I said, my voice coming out firm for the first time in 5 years. "Police station. The police station first, please." They exchanged a worried look, but took me. The Maryville police station was an old 2-story building on Main Street. When we entered, limping, supported by Mrs. Davis and Gerald, the officer at reception widened his eyes. "What happened?" I took a deep breath, gathering all the courage I had left. "I need to speak with the sheriff. It's about a murder. And about 5 years of false imprisonment." Sheriff Thompson was a serious man, with a graying mustache and penetrating gaze. When I sat in the chair in front of his desk, every movement agony because of my broken ankle and cracked rib, he crossed his arms and said, "Speak, miss, I'm listening." And I told everything. Everything. From the day my mother died, through Dr. Mitchell's false certificate, the move to the mansion, signing the papers, the 5 years of imprisonment, the Fridays in the attic, the wedding dress, the bamboo cane. My voice trembled, broke, but I didn't stop. And when I finished, I opened the cloth bundle and placed on his desk the blood-stained dress and my mother's yellowed note. Sheriff Thompson read the note 3 times, examined the dress, the dried blood stain, the poorly mended hole. He was silent for what seemed like eternity. Then he stood up, went to the door, and shouted, "Jackson, Porter, get in here now." 2 officers came running in. "Prepare a search warrant for Chester Henderson's mansion, and an arrest warrant, too. We're going to need to exhume a body." In the following days, the entire town was in shock. The police raided Uncle Chester's mansion. He'd come back from his trip and was there, calm, thinking I was still locked up. The look of surprise on his face when the officers entered and said he was under arrest for aggravated murder and false imprisonment was something I'll never forget. I was there at the station when they brought him in handcuffs. He saw me and screamed, "You're going to pay for this, you little tramp. You betrayed me." But I didn't look away. I looked right in his eyes and said, with a voice I didn't know I had, "The one who's going to pay is you, for everything you did to my mother." And to me. My mother's body was exhumed from Maryville Cemetery. It was horrible to have to go through that, to have to authorize them to open her casket 5 years later, but it was necessary. The new medical report, done by a medical examiner from Nashville that the police brought specially, confirmed everything. Perforation between the 5th and 6th rib, compatible with a sharp instrument like a knife, injury that would cause death within minutes. It wasn't a heart attack at all. It was murder. And Dr. Mitchell, confronted with the evidence and the confession my mother had left in the note, confessed he'd received money from Chester to forge the certificate. The trial lasted months. I had to testify, had to relive every detail of those 5 years, had to show the scars that still marked my back, my arms, my legs. It was painful. It was humiliating, but it was necessary. In December 1977, Chester Henderson was sentenced to 30 years in prison for aggravated murder and false imprisonment with torture. Dr. Mitchell got 10 years as an accomplice. Justice had been done. The inheritance my mother had left, and that Uncle Chester had stolen through those papers he made me sign, was returned to me. The house where I lived with my parents, the land, the savings. Everything came back to my name. For the first time since I was 19, I had resources. I had a future, I had choices. But before anything else, I needed to do one thing, one last thing. On an afternoon in January 1978, in the backyard of the house where I grew up on Commerce Street, I'd recovered possession of the house. I lit a bonfire. Mrs. Davis was with me, Gerald too, and some neighbors who had been my mother's friends. I grabbed that blood-stained white wedding dress, that symbol of so much suffering, so much hatred, so much pain, and threw it in the fire. Watching that fabric catch fire, watching the orange and red flames rise, consuming every inch of that cursed cloth, was the most liberating feeling of my life. Each flame was a prison breaking. Each spark was a Friday being erased from memory. When only ashes remained, I cried. But this time they were tears of relief, of liberation, of rebirth. I sold the land. I sold Uncle Chester's mansion, didn't want to even step in that place ever again. With the money, I paid all my debts, went through treatment with a psychologist in Nashville, took care of my health. I had surgery on the ankle that had been crooked. I treated the after effects of the beatings. I started eating right, gaining weight again, letting my hair grow. And in 1980, 3 years after escaping that hell, I decided to start over. I didn't want to stay in Maryville anymore. The town had too many memories, too many ghosts. I researched small and quiet towns in Tennessee, places where I could live in peace, where nobody knew me, where I could just be Laura, not that girl who was imprisoned by her uncle. And that's how I came to Crossville. Crossville welcomed me with open arms. I bought a simple but cozy little house. I got a job at the town library. I went back to what I loved to do before everything fell apart. And little by little, day by day, I rebuilt my life. I made new friends, met good people, started going to church, participating in town festivals, feeling part of a community again. In 1983, I met Ernest, a widower 16 years older than me, father of 2 grown children. He was a retired railroad worker, just like my father had been, and had a huge heart. We got married in 1984, in a simple ceremony at Crossville First Baptist Church. I wore a light blue dress, no veil, no pomp, and I was happy. We had a daughter, Denise, who's now 40 years old and gave me 4 beautiful grandchildren. Uncle Chester died in prison in 1995. Heart attack, irony of fate. When they told me, I felt nothing. Not anger, not joy, not sadness, just emptiness. A chapter finally closed. Today, here in my little house in Crossville, at 72 years old, I live a life that seems like a miracle. Every morning I wake up is a blessing I never take for granted. My Ernest passed away 6 years ago in 2019, also from his heart, but he lived to be 82 and passed away sleeping in peace. It was 35 years of good marriage, of companionship, of respect. He taught me that not all men are monsters, that love can be gentle, safe, warm. I live alone now, but alone doesn't mean lonely, not at all. My daughter Denise lives here in Crossville too, 3 blocks from my house, with her husband and my 4 grandchildren, Robert, age 15, Brittany, age 12, and the twins Michael and Melissa, age 8. They're always at my house. Brittany comes to help me make the caramel sauce every Saturday morning. She's already learning the right consistency. The girl has a gift. Robert chops wood for the stove. The twins run around the backyard, filling the house with noise and joy. This kitchen where I spend most of my time is my kingdom. Simple, with old wooden cabinets, wood stove that Ernest installed when we got married, a big pine table where the whole family gathers for Sunday dinners. The walls are full of photos, from my wedding with Ernest, little Denise, the grandchildren at various ages, an old photo of my mother that I keep fondly. I don't have a photo of my father because they were all destroyed during the time I was imprisoned, but his image lives here in my heart. The caramel sauce I make isn't just income, it's therapy. When I'm here, stirring the wooden spoon in that copper pot, listening to the cream bubbling slowly, smelling the sweet scent filling the kitchen, I connect with life in a way that's hard to explain. It's almost as if each jar of caramel I make is a declaration of victory. I survived. I won. I'm here. At the Saturday market, when customers taste it and say, "Miss Laura, your caramel is the best in town," I smile on the outside, but inside my heart celebrates the freedom to be able to make something simple and beautiful with my own hands. Besides the caramel sauce, I embroider tablecloths to sell at church. It's another craft I learned over time. Cross-stitch, satin stitch, chain stitch. I make tablecloths, dish towels with designs of flowers and fruits. The income supplements my retirement. I retired from the library in 2018 after working there for 38 years. The head librarian, Mrs. Nelson, cried on my last day. "Laura, you're an institution here," she said. And it was true. I helped generations of Crossville children discover the love of books. My house is humble, 2 rooms and a kitchen, a little bathroom in the back, but it's mine. I paid for it with money from selling the land. It has a little backyard where I plant herbs, chives, parsley, basil, mint, and some chickens that give me fresh eggs every day. The chicken Beatrice, the oldest, is already 6 years old and still lays eggs religiously. The grandkids love coming to get the warm eggs from the nest. I go to church every Sunday, 8 o'clock Mass at the First Baptist. I'm part of the Wednesday prayer group, along with other ladies my age. We pray, have coffee and cake, talk about life. They know my story. Everyone in Crossville knows, one way or another, but nobody pries, you know. They respect me. They treat me as Laura, the caramel maker, the embroiderer, the grandmother of 4, not as that poor woman who suffered. There are scars, of course, physical and emotional. The marks on my back never completely disappeared. They look like thin white stripes that only God and I see when I look at myself in the mirror. The left ankle still hurts when it's going to rain, a pang that reminds me of that jump for freedom. And there are nights, I won't lie, when the nightmares come back. I dream I'm trapped again, that the attic door is locking, that there's no way out. I wake up sweating, my heart racing, and need to get up, turn on the light, remind myself, "You're in Crossville, you're free. He's dead. It's over." And I breathe deeply and go back to sleep. But those nights are rare now. With time, with a lot of time really, the wound healed. I never forgot. How could I? But I learned to carry that story not as a burden, but as a testimony. I survived hell and came back. Few can say that. Last month, Denise asked me if I still had resentment. We were here in the kitchen, peeling potatoes for Sunday dinner. I stopped, thought carefully, and answered honestly, "No, sweetheart, I don't have resentment anymore. What I have is gratitude. Gratitude for being alive, for having known your father, for having you, for having these beautiful grandchildren, for having this little house, this stove, this pot of caramel." And it was true. The hatred that saved me that night in the attic has already fulfilled its purpose. Today, what moves me is love. Love for the life I rebuilt, brick by brick. If there's one thing I need to tell you who are listening now, it's this. Not every monster wears a scary mask. Sometimes the monster wears a suit, brings flowers to the wake, offers shelter when you're vulnerable. Sometimes the monster is family. When someone who should protect you starts to isolate you, firing staff, locking doors, cutting your contact with the world, that's not protection. It's prison. When someone makes you sign papers saying it's for your own good, but won't let you read carefully or consult someone else, that's not help. It's theft. When someone tells you you're to blame for someone else's mistakes, that you need to pay for something you didn't do, that's not justice. It's manipulation. I was imprisoned for 5 years because I was ashamed. Ashamed to admit that my own uncle, my blood, was my tormentor. Ashamed to imagine that nobody would believe me. But listen carefully to what this grandma is telling you. Don't be ashamed to report family. Kinship is not a license for evil. Blood doesn't justify torture. If you're living in a situation where someone in your family controls you, isolates you, hurts you, physically or emotionally, save evidence. Write down dates, keep messages, take photos of injuries, write notes, and hide them in safe places. It was my mother's note that saved me. It was the dress with blood that condemned my tormentor. Without evidence, it would have been my word against his, and he had money, power, respectability. But with evidence, the truth came to light. And if you're reading this and realizing that someone you know is being isolated, a neighbor you don't see anymore, a colleague who disappeared, a cousin who doesn't answer the phone anymore, insist. Knock on the door. Ask if everything's okay. Offer help. Mrs. Davis, who found me in the street, could have passed by, thought, it's not my problem. But she stopped. She helped. She took me to the police station. She saved my life. Freedom is not something we should negotiate. No matter how difficult the financial situation, how alone you feel, how scared you are, your freedom is worth more than any false comfort offered by someone who wants to control you. And for those of you who went through something similar and managed to get out, I understand you. I know the scars don't disappear. I know the nightmares come back. I know there are days when fear knocks on the door again. But look at me, 72 years old, 4 beautiful grandchildren, a fragrant kitchen, a life worth living. We can rebuild. It may not be quick, it may not be easy, but it's possible. Now, if you really listened to me until now, subscribe to Grandparents' Tales, like the video and comment what time you're finishing watching this video. Thank you for your kindness. See you soon.